welcome to the latest episode of the Dram show with me, Chris Goodrum. Filming this a little bit earlier this afternoon than I normally would have a tendency to do, so I can go off and watch Liverpool play Oldham in the FA Cup with a nice beer or two, maybe. But anyway, that's by the by. Right, what have I got for you this afternoon? Well, I thought about what I was going to do for this episode of the show, and as good fortune would happen, the rep from Gordon MacPhail turned up in the shop the other day with some brand new samples for me to try. So here we go, something topical, something brand new. What am I talking about? I'm talking about Glen Scotia. As you probably know, Glen Scotia is not the forgotten distillery of Campbelltown, but should we say probably the least well-known distillery in Campbelltown. For years, the only bottling available was a solitary 12-year-old, which was okay, that's pretty much about as it's been for a number of years. But tail end of last year, beginning of this year, they have increased the range, revamped it, new packaging, new fancy website, etc., etc. So I thought I'd take a look at Glen Scotia. So anyway, bit of waffle. Got the trusty book. Now apparently the reason why Glen Scotia hasn't released an awful lot of older age statements was generally, like a lot of distilleries, numerous periods of being mothballed and not producing, sort of left big gaps in the age statements of the spirits that they had available. But and certainly, if you look at the checkered history of Glen Scotia since it was founded in 1832, it's gone through, like I said, a fair few hands, and which has meant sort of periods of production and periods of non-production. Certainly the last significant period of non-production, shall we say, was between 1994 and 1999, when in 1999 it started redistilling again with using staff from Springbank, and it wasn't until the following year, 2000, that the Loch Lomond Distillery, or Loch Lomond Distilling Company, I should say, took over production and are the current owners. So, should we say, a revamp of the range has certainly been well overdue. I mean, you certainly see a lot of Glen Scotia bottled by the independents, but it had all been quiet on the distillery front until now. So. I guess that's enough waffle, and shall I introduce the lineup then? Right, I mean, as I was saying, prior to this there's only been a 12-year-old, but now suddenly we have 5 new bottlings. I mean, don't normally have 5 samples to taste with you, apart from a couple of weeks ago when I did the Axis of Evil tasting. Incidentally, while we're talking about the Axis of Evil, I've been umming and ahhing, as you probably know, about Jura. Now, a lot of people are probably going to be up in arms about this because they like Jura, but I had a tasting a couple of weekends ago with a good friend of mine of the 10-year-old, the 16, and the Superstition, and they were really fusty, musty, awful bottlings. I mean, all right. They were miniatures, and as we well know, the industry doesn't tend to bottle particularly great stuff into miniatures. They have this view of miniatures, and I think this jaundiced view of the travel retail sector as well, which I think they're shooting themselves in the foot over. But anyway, coming back to the whole point of Jura, I've kind of not lost patience, but I've tasted it so often now to be just completely disappointed. I mean, the Superstition, I just thought I was tasting leche. I mean, it was cardboardy, lightly peated, and I was just thinking, no, this has just gone for far too long. It's about time they became a fully paid up member of the Axis of Evil. So there you go. Distillery number 6 to join that exclusive club, Jura. Obviously I'll elaborate further on that when my next newsletter comes out. But anyway, so what have we got? We've got, these are all bottled at 46%. So we've got a 10-year-old, a 12-year-old, a 16-year-old, an 18-year-old and a 21-year-old. I don't know the sort of current retail prices, as I've only just received these samples and tasted them for the first time yesterday in actual fact. So I would guess, like most things, you're looking at sort of, sort of 30 to probably £90, I guess, at the top end, somewhere of that sort of ilk. Anyway, so let's crack on with the this afternoon's tasting then, shall we? Right, as you can see, from the colour, I would ascertain that these are all aged in American oak. There's no sherry here at all, so let's see what the nose on the 10-year-old gives us then, shall we? Yeah, it's pleasantly fruity. A little bit of straw, a little bit of peat. It's got that kind of stewed fruits, and sort of the thing with this kind of character, I find it does tend to sort of come across as a little bit murky, a little bit muddy. Quite a chunk of vanilla, and I mean I would guess that they probably used some first fill American oak, because it is very, very noticeable. It's okay. I don't think it's going to sort of set the world on fire, but oily, a little bit of saltiness, which you tend to find with the Campbelltown whiskies. Touch of boiled sweets, maybe sort of that kind of Penderyn-y sort of boiled sweet character. You can smell it. It's certainly young spirit, but it is what it is. And if you like sort of relatively heavy oaked malts, then you'd probably like this. About then. Now it does, it has a lot of that baked fruit, which comes across, like I said, slightly murky. There's a bit of peat, a lot of oak. It really sort of suddenly hammers in on the mid palate. I mean, admittedly, it's lovely, sweet, creamy, very, very much I would say a lot of first fill American oak. Because it is really creamy, really intense. I mean, it's not kind of covering up, but it's kind of, I think if that had been aged in, say, sort of refill casks, that would have been a little bit on the thin side, shall we say, but it's okay. It's a style I find I don't really warm to, because, like I said, this kind of stewed fruit kind of character can come across a little bit murky, a little bit muddy. Chuck in a little bit of peat as well, and it all becomes pretty earthy, and I wouldn't say charmless. I mean, it can be on some occasions. I've tasted some malts that sort of display that kind of character, and if they're slightly industrial as well, it all comes across as a bit hard work. So jury's, I think, out on that one. Right, okay, on to the 12-year-old. Let's see what this one's like then, shall we? Now, that's a better nose. It's fresher, more citrus, it's cleaner, it's less murky, it's less of the baked fruit kind of character, a little bit more barley, very, very lightly peated, reasonable amount of coastal character, lightly oiled. There's a nice sugary component, to this. It's kind of all quite harmonious and not so much of the oak character. I would guess that this is probably more or less been aged in refill American oak. But the oak is there. It's kind of sitting at the background. It's adding a bit of structure, which is quite nice, which is how you want it. Yeah, it's got some charm. It has to be said. Still a little bit on the earthy side, but nevertheless, you know, that's not a bad nose. That's quite pleasant. Maybe sort of 12-year-old is you know, an ideal age for Glen Scotia. Anyway, have a time. That's relatively complex, actually. I mean, it is displaying some of that baked fruit kind of character, malty, slightly molasses-like, a little bit of peat, touch of boiled sweets again, some nice barley. It's got a good grip to it. Some pleasant oak. It's kind of, you know, again, very subtle oak, giving it some structure and some backbone. Quite salty. Finish is nicely salty, and with that little bit of citrus, it's certainly a lot fresher. You can tell it's maybe a little bit older than the 10-year-old. It's not a huge difference in the sort of maturity flavours, but I think that is actually not too bad at all. That just seems to me that obviously 12 years old is just sort of you know, an apt bottling age for Nova Scotia. So yeah, I like that one. That's not too bad at all. Right, okay, let's have a look at the 16 then. So yeah, bit of a jump up in age statement. Let's see how this one fares then, shall we? Oilier, sort of more fish oils now. Cod liver oil maybe. A little bit of sugar. Bit of pepper actually. I think I got there. Again, sort of lightly boiled sweets, although less of it, should we say, than say the 12-year-old, as you would expect with the increasing maturity. Yeah, I mean it's a little bit muted, a little bit closed in on itself. It's got some, like I say, quite sort of thick oils. Again, some background oak. Yep, it's all right. Okay, palate time then. A little bit more peaty, sort of dusty, slightly coal dust. Nice fleeting granulated sugar kind of note. Again, it's a bit murky. It's got that sort of baked fruit kind of character, but it does have quite a sort of a pleasant sort of granulated sugar finish. A little bit of barley, a bit of bittering. Certainly a little bit of bittering from the oak. I wouldn't go as far as saying that's charmless. I mean, I think the nose was a bit closed in on itself, and you know it's okay. It's I still think 12-year-old is more interesting. Right, on to the 18-year-old. Let's see what if this nose is developing any further character, shall we? a little bit more development. Again, quite briny, fishy. There's certainly, you can certainly smell a greater amount of maturity. It's got some old wood. Not got quite that sort of same sweetness as the 16-year-old had. Again, the nose does feel a bit kind of closed in on itself. It's not giving, should we say, a huge amount away. I mean, and I think that's probably due to sort of the increasing oily kind of character, which you've noticed as the age statements have gone up, it has got progressively oilier. Yeah, a little bit of fish, a little bit of peat. Yeah, it's okay. About time. Sort of along the line, similar lines to the 16. Again, sort of like quite sort of oily and fishy to start with, and then moving through into a sort of more granulated sugar, sweet barley character. But still, it's again a little bit flat. Again, it's a little bit sort of that. It's that stewed fruit kind of character. Again, is making it feel a little bit murky, a little bit earthy. There's a little bit of peat as well, and it's a bit odd, it has to be said. You've got this kind of, like I said, you've got this kind of slightly murky character, and then you've got the sweetness as well. It is just slightly odd, it has to be said. And I don't know, it just kind of lacks the freshness, the citrusness of the 12-year-old to kind of like give it some lift and give it some, you know, something other than that character. So again, I mean, it's not a bad whiskey. It's not a bad malt at all, and I think it's a sort of style that you have to like. For me, it is leaving me a little bit cold, but yeah, que sera, sera, as they say. And finally, the 21-year-old. Let's see what this is going to give us then, shall we? Ooh, that's interesting. Sort of shredded wheaty, burnt shredded wheat, toasted. A bit more caramel, a bit more sort of old oak. Getting quite manure-y, that sort of lovely manure-y kind of peat. A little bit of tar as well. A little bit of the baked fruit, but not as much. It's sort of a little bit more restrained with regards to that. It's just quite stinky, quite manure-y. Really nice actually. I'm quite enjoying that. But then, as you know, I kind of like a bit of stinky manure-iness. Little floral note, a little bit of barley, bit of sugar. It's all pretty harmonious, the nose. And it certainly seems to me that between 12 and 21 years old, it does seem to go through a little bit of an awkward phase. Nice maturity, you know. Nice nose, like that. Love it. Again, there's some baked fruit. It's very gentle, more of a citrus note that's come back now, which is giving it a sort of like a nice lift, a little bit of freshness, certainly on the edge of the palate. Again, the peat is quite manure-y, not as pungent as the nose would lead you to believe. Mature, nice dusty peat dust finish, good length. Like I said, that sort of citrus element is certainly giving it giving it a little bit of a lift, a little bit of freshness, and again, a little bit of oak, but again, sort of nicely sat in the background and sort of quite controlled. So yeah, that's nice. I like that. That's pretty good. Right, okay, so let's sum this up then. Glen Scotia, well, it's probably about time they did something else with their spirit, rather than just release it as a 12-year-old. But to be honest with you, I think the standout bottling, certainly for me, is the 12-year-old and the 21-year-old. They just have that little bit of citrus, that lift, that little bit of freshness. The 10-year-old's okay. Like I said, there's a lot of oak, a lot of what I would assume fresh fill or first fill American oaks, a lot of creaminess. And if you kind of like that sort of style, then great. You know, it's fairly unpretentious. 12-year-old, I think the 12-year-old just seems to me to be, you know, all round really nice. I guess it's probably going to be somewhere in the region of about 40 quid, and I think that is certainly worth it. 16 and the 18, I'm just kind of not quite so enamoured with, it has to be said. They both feel a little bit awkward. It doesn't seem to sort of know where it is. It doesn't have that sort of citrusy note. It's quite sort of, like I say, murky. That sort of baked fruit kind of character is kind of is prevalent, which is kind of leading to this kind of sort of malty, murky kind of character. Again, I mean, not bad. It just seems certainly on the nose to be, you know, a little bit sort of closed in, and I think for the money, I mean, again, I don't know what they're going to sort of retail at, but I guess you're looking at sort of what, 50 quid, 70 quid, I guess, for the 18. And personally, I wouldn't sort of, there wouldn't be a malt that I would go to for sort of either of those sort of price points. I mean, there are certainly going to be customers that probably like that sort of style, but for me, I just don't think that they're kind of, it justifies the price tag personally. 21-year-old, on the other hand, I think is really nice. It does, like I said, it seems to me that 12-year-old is just sort of like a really good age for Glen Scotia, and then it goes a little bit closed in, and it eventually sort of pops out at 21-year-old as a really nice mature malt. Maybe it's, you know, there's a little bit sort of higher peating level malt used in the 21 as opposed to the 16 and the 18. Maybe again, I think it's probably down to that sort of slight sort of citrus lift, but yeah, I think all told, you know, a really interesting tasting, and like I said, it's nice to see sort of Glen Scotia doing something other than the 12-year-old, and it's nice to sort of focus on a Campbelltown malt that isn't Springbank, although, you know, I do love Springbank. I think it's again an excellent malt. And the strange thing is that I think sort of Springbank is probably a more interesting malt when it gets into its teens, into its 15, 18, that kind of age again. But again, it's a sort of, you know, it's fairly heavily wooded style which you have to like. And I've always been a bit, you know, about Springbank 10-year-old, and certainly sort of anything younger than 10 is just you know, far too young as far as Springbank is concerned. So it's interesting to see that where Springbank really comes into its own in its mid-teens. I personally think that Glen Scotia comes into its own a lot earlier on, around about sort of the 12, or when it's got some considerable age, when at 21. So anyway, I think that was quite an interesting tasting, and let's hope you enjoyed the show. I will endeavour to get these tasting notes up on my blog at some stage, and hopefully this week we'll be able to crack on and you know, make a start on doing the next newsletter. So that will be out, I'm hoping, well, mid-February maybe. That should have sort of quite a lot of interesting stuff in, and and then the next one will obviously be you know, my report on the World Whisky Awards, which I'm currently in the middle of judging, and will be going down to London for round 3 in a couple of weeks' time. So looking forward to that. So all that's left to say is, thankfully, there's a little bit of 12-year-old left in my glass. So good afternoon, good dramming, and see you later.
Minkä